In this week's episode of Let's Talk About It, we are going to explore how COVID has forced the church to evolve. And then in our relationship segment, we're going to talk about what COVID has taught about ourselves and how it's affected our relationship. So you're here, you've joined us. Now let's talk about it.
Well, hello there.
Hi.
And welcome to this episode of Let's Talk About It. I'm Malcolm.
And I'm Micah.
This is our post-Thanksgiving episode. After all of the carbs.
All of the carbs.
Tryptophan and sweets. Mm-hmm. We're still in the midst of leftovers, but the main part is over.
It's still good. Yeah, this is a good kind of carb-itis. Mm-hmm. For the last 48 hours. But, you know, how are you feeling? All carb-itis aside.
That's tight. So we had to do not our first Thanksgiving on our own. This is our second one without the bulk of the cooking being done by our families.
Yeah. We're grown-ups now.
Yes. But it feels good to, do it. To know that you can do it.
That's true.
If it was ever an emergency situation and the family's like, oh my gosh, mom and grandma can't cook.
Yeah.
We need y'all to hold it down and be like,
we got this.
I got you. I got you.
Although I have to say, Malcolm has a larger portion of the Thanksgiving menu down pat. I'm still working through my side dishes, getting those perfected first.
I've only done side dishes. I haven't had to cook a turkey or ham or anything.
I guess that's true. I think you look better doing it, so you get more points.
How are you doing?
Yeah, I mean, I feel just grateful, and gosh, that sounds cliche. So I apologize, but I do mean that.
You're grateful, thankful, filled with gratitude and thankfulness.
All variations of the phrase. And also, yeah, just heavy. That's okay.
There's going to be some detoxing that needs to happen.
Now, we have been drinking lots of water, so I feel proud of ourselves.
There's going to need to be a more aggressive detox. Be some green smoothies in my future.
Yeah, but that's all right. That's a part of the process. Mm-hmm. So, what do we have on the menu for today?
I see you do that. It said menu. We're going to talk about the thing that has ruined all of our holidays.
Yikes. It has reshaped our holiday experience.
Absolutely.
A lot.
And it's COVID.
Yeah.
So we have dubbed this episode about COVID Part 1.
Part 1.
We do not know what the other parts are about, but we are assuming that there will be more
there
parts.
Will be more parts.
This is such a big part of our lives.
Yeah. And so there will be many elements of our lives to discuss as far as how COVID has impacted those elements. But today in our Faith and Context segment, we wanted to start off by talking about the church.
Yes.
And how COVID has affected the capital C church. So I suppose a preface is helpful. We're not talking about one version of the church here, although I think there'll be moments during our conversation where we will distinguish if we are.
Yeah, I mean, the examples we'll use will probably more than likely be from our real life.
Exactly. But I think it'll be helpful to put those in the words. So, but we're talking about the capital C, universal, all Christians who follow Jesus, united church. And so we're acknowledging that COVID has affected all of us in, I think, ways that we have in common. And then for some of our subcultures within the capital C church, there are different ways that COVID has affected us. But I think for me, what I would like to begin with is, instead of thinking about how COVID has affected lay leadership, high level volunteers in church, and even church staff members, how it's affected the church member. Because I've been, you know, the only social media world that I'm involved in is Twitter. But just lamenting with people how being in a building every week and seeing people face to face that you expect to see every week was something that we relied upon for a lot of our emotional health.
Yeah.
And I don't think outside of COVID we would have realized that.
Yeah.
I certainly took it for granted. And even as an more introverted than not person, realizing that, oh, like, crap, where am I going to get my socialization for this week? Like, the people I laughed with and the babies that I, made faces at and the people I hugged, those were moments were filling my emotional tank. And so I think a lot of us church members are just lamenting that.
Well, I think it magnified the importance of community, right? And even reshaped what that looks like. Like we looked at it it was very binary. It was just like meals together, being together in worshiping together.
You're either in person or you're not.
Yeah, that's what community is. But COVID has forced us to kind of open up our definition of what it means to be in community with people.
Yeah.
What does it mean to have a small group where you don't see these people every week in person? What does it mean to actually have that relationship, either sometimes via text messages or phone calls, or, in other cases, Zoom calls?
Yeah.
So how do you maintain that relationship?
And so now I think we're acknowledging that community isn't just sharing a physical space together, but we're acknowledging that the Christian community shares emotional space together, and that is going to look very different within this COVID norm. And so, like you mentioned, the simple sending a text message to let someone know that you're thinking about them is such, for me, I only speak for myself, but it's such a beautiful way to let someone know that, like, you're occupying space in my heart and mind, even when we're not in person. Or even, like, people are getting, creative and doing the devotionals together on the YouVersion app, right? I know lots of folks are Zoomed out, so small groups over Zoom. It's not, it's not particularly. I don't think people are eagerly heading to their small group Zoom meetings as much as they were in the beginning. But now we're acknowledging that, like, okay, this is the way that we refrain from forsaking the assembly, right? As it says in Hebrews, and it's what we have right now. Yeah. So I think that's one way COVID has forced the church to change.
Well, it's interesting that when you think about, we were just talking about community, you think about what the early church was. The early church was not really predicated on large gatherings. It was very much a home-to-home thing. And so it's almost bringing it back to, like, that level of basics of what the emphasis of church was. Church was the community of people living life together.
Yeah.
And it was a little bit easier, obviously, before there were cars and other modes of transportation where the proximity of people was so much more. You were in much bigger clumps of people, much closer together. And so this, weirdly, as much as it's not basics being digital, it's still bringing us back to that basic principle of community. The church is the people, and community is how we relate with one another.
Exactly.
And do life with one another.
Yeah, I really like the way you said that. It's the how we relate. And I'm thinking of Acts chapter 2, like the very end of it, where the early church is described as, these people who refused to go a day without eating together and sharing everything in common and worshiping together in the temple, praying together. These were these hows that you're talking about. It wasn't necessarily the where or the when, right? It was, this is how we do this. We commit to doing it regularly. And it was really about connecting, this genuine, intentional, rhythmic connection. And now we have to really lean into handling that for ourselves
Yeah.
in this COVID season, rather than kind of taking for granted that the church is always going to open its doors on 8 a.m. every Sunday.
Yep.
And, you go to this place and people are going to, high level volunteers and a pastor that is probably stretched too thin and hasn't been eating and sleeping as regularly as they should. They're going to put this service together for you, and you're going to sit and you'll consume it, and then you'll go home and you'll eat and maybe watch some football. So it's a new day for sure.
Absolutely.
So we've kind of talked about that angle as the member of the church. But I don't know, what are your thoughts about how it's affected church leadership as someone who is, you're on staff at a church, worship creative director?
Just from conversations I've had with other people and in my own experience, it's definitely stretching us beyond what we a lot of us are doing roles. Our roles have expanded in a way that we weren't initially either hired for, or for some other people weren't trained on or had the ability to do readily. They had to learn.
Yeah.
I was fortunate once we kind of went into COVID and the stay-at-home order started happening. I was trained in journalism, so I knew how to edit video and do things like that. So I was able to call up some skills that I already had. But I know some other people are just like, "Hey, we've got to put on a live service tomorrow. What do I do?"
Whoa.
And that's, a lot of places, especially places that weren't doing any streaming or anything like that, and really didn't have that online presence. They're really starting from zero.
Yeah, from scratch.
And they don't have a staff of people that could figure it out. They've got to kind of figure it out on their own. So it's definitely, I think, it reveals some things about your heart posture as well. Like, am I doing this for any other reason other than I love God and I love people?
Yikes.
Because this will reveal some things.
Wow.
Especially early on when we're just trying to figure out how to do it. For me, I was just like, man, I'm exhausted, but I love my church.
Yeah.
I love the people at my church. I love my job. This is still, even in this season, it's still my dream job. So it was not a problem for me to have long nights on Saturday night to get the service ready, or, having to plan all this stuff differently than we were used to. But I think for a lot of people, it can be kind of challenging because you're like, man, I just came here to be, the kids director. I didn't come here to learn how to do, how to shoot video and edit video.
Right. Yikes.
And then I couldn't even imagine, I'm lucky enough to be a paid staff person, but there's people, volunteers, they don't have staff. So this is all volunteer people that have jobs and work and other stuff to do, and they still are giving their time to the church. So it's really, it's a really different experience depending on what kind of church you're at, what kind of infrastructure was already in place, especially these smaller churches that didn't have anything digital.
Yeah.
It's really rough for them, and the adjustment has been really difficult.
But I've been really encouraged by the generosity of knowledge that I've seen.
Yeah.
I've seen pastors just readily share, this is what we're doing, this is how we're doing it in order to get these live services or recorded services online. And that's just a really beautiful thing. And I think it's a way that the church can so easily distinguish itself from the world, is to say that, look, we're all doing this for the same reason, so that the church would be edified, so that we would all look more like Jesus and we would gather more disciples. And so there's no reason to hoard information or to hoard knowledge, because we're all playing for the same team, so to speak. So I think that's beautiful to see. And then also, like you said, it just this revelation of what motivates us that COVID is doing is, in some cases, it's been hard to watch, because you have seen some church leadership be visibly more concerned with their image or the number of church members that they have, or the amount of engagement that they're getting online, because that converts into tithes dollars and things like that. And that's, it's a little disheartening, because I think, for one, having that kind of heart posture puts so much pressure on you to perform and to, release this product. And you become, I don't know, you kind of become prisoner to that rather than someone who's motivated by the love of God and the love for his people, for God's people. So,
I mean, there's some real world things, like some of these, especially smaller churches that didn't have online giving, like it looks very different. The world looks very different for them, and their decisions are very different that they have to make, especially as it comes to regathering, and whether or not to stop regathering if there's cases and things like that. It's very different for a church that doesn't have, for example, a strong online giving culture or platform. A lot of churches didn't come back from their stay-at-home orders for that reason. They weren't getting any tithes and offering. People couldn't give, and they weren't in the building, so they couldn't really recoup it. So that's also part of it too. It's not always, their hearts weren't in the right place. Sometimes they weren't ready. They couldn't pivot in time, and they had to make decisions based on, okay, we have to regather to to literally survive as an entity.
Absolutely.
And then people were struggling as well. People, a lot of people lost their jobs or weren't working as much, and they couldn't give.
Or they didn't have the emotional or mental margin to sit in front of a screen. Yeah. By the week's end.
Yeah. So that's a lot of, we talked about it amongst our staff and even other churches that I talked to. Like, after a certain amount of weeks, people were just kind of like, getting burnt out with the online church thing. And so we saw numbers dip and things like that. And you're like, well, whoa, you start to like panic, like, what do we do? But part of it is just they're zooming for work, they're zooming for school, they're zooming to see their family, they're zooming to learn things that they need to learn to be able to work from home. And then you're like, come watch church on YouTube. And you're like,
I don't want another Zoom meeting.
And then you as leaders, you want to be, okay, we got to replace all the things that we're not doing. We got to have a virtual Bible study and virtual prayer meeting and virtual meetings for this and all this stuff. And then you're just and then people are, by the time Sunday comes on, I've been on Zoom every day for 9 hours a day. And Sunday they're like, I'm just going to sit here with my kids. That's it.
And look at a blank wall and maybe some of their toys and that don't make noise.
Just going to look outside the window and remember what it was like to go outside.
Yeah. I appreciate you bringing that up. In my mind, as I was thinking out loud about that just now, I wasn't imagining the church staff that you described, right? That just by the time March 2020 came, had not shifted or incorporated digital giving or, even things like distributing sermon notes online yet. Those people weren't on my mind, and I appreciate you bringing that up, because I think for even folks that we have seen who have appeared to be consumed by the numbers and we got to get people engaged and stuff like that. I think what you're highlighting is that there's something underneath that that's a legitimate fear of not being able to keep your church doors open by the time, Lord, please willing, we come up with a vaccine and, we've built up some herd immunity against this thing, we can get back into person. And so, I just appreciate you bringing up that complexity, because it's not just as simple as a pastor just I just want to have the best online experience ever. There's some legitimate concerns. And I think what COVID has shown us is that there's a little bit, for me, I'm just going to speak for myself, there's a little bit that I grieve in terms of the church. Gosh, this is going to sound so elementary, but I wish the church didn't have to worry about money. You know what I mean? I wish that, I don't even know how it would be possible in a capitalist system, but that the church just have these storehouses of money to just always give to the community and to bless people with and to keep its bills paid. And so the church wouldn't have to, have this fear, because we're human. We can't help but to be worried about not being able to pay the church's lease every month, So this is, it's just really, it's heartbreaking. But then on the other hand, it's it's beautiful to see the creativity that people come up with and the resilience that pastors are pulling from their community and from prayer and faith in God to just go from Sunday to Sunday doing what we've never done before. Yeah. It's amazing.
I think this sort of forced evolution was necessary. In a way, it's necessary. I hate to say that, God ordained this to do this or do that, but I think by and large there's things on every poll, but by and large, if you look at the median of churches, a lot hasn't changed in how we do church and how we relate with one another in church community. So we've had social media for over a decade now. We've had YouTube and other things like this for a long time. We've had the ability to record video on our phones, but by and large, these platforms haven't really been used. No.
That's a good point.
The primary vehicle of church has been the Sunday morning gathering.
The stage, yeah.
Or
the pulpit.
Yes. Stage, pulpit, podium, lectern.
Yeah.
So this is opening up for a lot of churches, a way to reach people that they never would have reached otherwise.
Amen.
And to start to evaluate how they use their resources for things outside of what they've traditionally done in the past. But hey, we need to allocate a budget for some equipment. We need to allocate a budget for streaming. We need to allocate a budget for somebody to be able to come in and handle the digital things that need to happen at a church. And I think in the year 2020, if you don't have a social media account at a minimum, you're really doing yourself a disservice in reaching not only your people, but people outside of your sphere of influence.
Yeah, it's a missed opportunity for sure. And speaking of resources, I think pastors are beginning to trust their church members with more nowadays, because it's just the reality is the limits, like just the natural human limits of our pastors are being revealed by COVID. Yeah. And that's not a bad thing. It's just an opportunity and I've seen some pastors do this amazingly, including our own. Shout out to Pastor Rich Johnson of Sanctuary Columbus Church. But just really trusting people and just saying like, hey, I see you have this gifting. Yeah. I'm gonna hand this over to you and I'm gonna say yes to how you want to bless people with your gift, and I think that's a beautiful way to, again, demonstrate that the church is really about sharing power as a demonstration of this flourishing abundance that Jesus said he came to give us, right? Like he came to give us life more abundantly, not to have this like white knuckling tight grasp on power and information and knowledge. It's like, let's be generous with this. Let's share. Let's trust our church members with, edifying itself, So it's a challenging but encouraging time because we're seeing church evolve. We're seeing people evolve. And we're seeing people grow in a lot of areas as well. Yeah. Community looks different, but we've adjusted. We're making the adjustment. We are. And I think we're being more gracious with one another too. Like more and more I'm hearing folks just say, look, I ain't got it this week. And folks just nod their head, and all right, that's okay, and we needed that. Yeah. To your point of this is an opportunity for the church to evolve in ways that it maybe hasn't. I think before COVID, there might have been this hyper focus on performance and like, let's get this certain kind of a product out each week. And now we're just like, look, we have spent 45 and a half hours on Zoom and phone calls. These are my, fish and loaves that I have to give the Lord. This is all I got. And we're gracious enough with one another to say, that's enough, and we trust that God's going to do something amazing with that.
The last thing I'll say about this is I think no one's asked me for any advice, but here's some advice that I have learned, and particularly from our pastor. We'll do what we can do and not try to do anything more than that. And so for any church, if you're trying to figure out, I don't feel like we're doing enough, look at your team. Look at your capabilities. What can you do?
What can you do?
And let that be enough. Don't worry about trying to do what everybody else is doing. There's a lot of great ideas out there, but it's not for all of us. We can't execute it all. There's things that we had to leave on the table, but we do what we can do as a team, what it makes sense for us as a team to handle, and we offer what we can, and let the Lord do the rest.
There you go. Boom.
Boom.
All right, end of episode. All right, thanks for coming, guys. No, I'm just kidding.
Offering plates are in the back.
No, but of course, as we mentioned earlier, this is not going to be the only part of this conversation.
Nope.
But if you would like to chime in on this part, please head to Twitter. You know what the hashtag is. Talk About It Pod.
POD.
And continue the conversation there. We'd love to hear what you think.
And as we continue our COVID conversations, we're going to get a little personal and talk about how COVID has affected us personally. Is that how we're going to word it?
Yeah. I mean, this is our relationships segment, right? Yes. And so I think what I've been reflecting on is how COVID has shaped me, and then how that new shaping has affected our relationship, like within our marriage and in our friendship. I don't know. It's been a humbling time for me, because I think I've prided myself on being able to hide things like my irritability more easily. And man, if COVID don't reveal nothing else, it reveals my irritability. And so I would say that it's COVID has certainly made me more raw. I'm spending more emotional energy. Using screens all day is just more taxing for me. And so I've had to be as best as I can. I mean, you would be a better evaluator of this because you're in the receiving end. But I've had to be more upfront with how much emotional energy I have in a given moment. And to just acknowledge that my irritability has like nothing to do with you, but it's like, I don't know if I can have any more social input into any of my senses anymore, and to just be able to say that. But I think that can definitely put a strain just on our relationship, because wanting to relate with one another, but coming to a shared space in our home with so little left from the day has been sad at times. So yeah, those are a few of my thoughts. What about you? What have you noticed?
I would say that COVID has exposed things, I think, and left me having to deal with some emotions and some feelings that I would rather not deal with ever.
Yeah.
So, I'm a person that prides myself on being productive and being able to do work and have a really high output at a high level. And so there's just been some days where I just can't. My brain is not going to function that way today because it's tired from the last 10 days of just of just pushing and grinding. And it wasn't such a big adjustment for me working from a screen because I work from home. So I'm always on a computer, laptop, phone, iPad, something.
Yeah.
So that wasn't that big of an adjustment. So I was thankful, at least from that standpoint. It wasn't like, oh my gosh, this is a whole new workflow. It's basically, really my workflow hasn't changed much other than the fact that there's more people in the house than there was before.
That's true.
But I definitely felt the weight of everything that I had to do, particularly with all the church stuff, and then trying to figure out how to balance that with my freelance design work and other things I'm trying to do. So that weight was really heavy.
Yeah.
And I would say probably the first month, I guess March through like middle of April, I don't feel like I took a day. Like I was just like Monday through Monday.
Yeah,
I was just,
you were pushing.
Just, I gotta do this. I gotta get this done. I gotta get this done. I can't really, weekends were not really weekends. It's like, we can't go out anyway. So I'm just gonna like
keep
trying to bang this workout that I need to get done. So that really made me like have to be intentional, because at times it made me take a rest when I didn't want to take a rest. Like my body was like, oh no, you're taking a rest because I cannot function anymore. You're like, I'm done. And so then I've got to deal with I'm not doing something. Like I gotta be using this time. And so it really forced me to confront that and, find what my Sabbath day of rest was going to be and sticking to it and being committed to that and protecting it.
Yeah.
And not letting the voices in my head tell me that I need to be doing something that I'm doing something bad by not working. And so that was really difficult. And it's still difficult at times now. But it was a really big adjustment for me because, when you work Monday through Fridays, you have a built-in, it's the weekend. No one's calling you. And I was pretty good when I did go into the office. I didn't check email or worry about work. Like I left it at work. But when you work from home, it's different.
It's always with you.
When you're an entrepreneur, it's different. when you work at a church where Sunday is kind of a work day already, it's different. So there's that. And then just some of just without getting super specific, but some of the just emotional stuff that I don't like to deal with regularly, I had to be confronted with. Why do I feel like I need to work all the time? Like, why do I feel like I have to be productive all the time? And then all that on top of some of the social injustice things and racial things that have been going on in our country, all of that weight was happening in the middle of a pandemic on top of that. So,
and there was nothing you could do to distract yourself, really.
There's nowhere you could go. Yeah. You can't go on a vacation. You can't.
It's just you and those emotions sitting on your bed with you.
In the same room that you've been in for the last 3 months. So that was really just some days I would come to Micah. So just to let you guys know a little bit of the dynamic, we sometimes we're able to work right now. At least right now we're able to work in the same space. But prior to that, Micah had her own space because she works at a job where confidentiality is very important. And then I worked at a different space. And so we come together. And so when we come together, I'd be legitimately excited about seeing her and just bombard her with questions about her day and be like, Micah, oh my God, okay, well, how are you doing? How are you feeling? What did you do? And Micah's looking at me like, bro, I don't really want to I ain't got it.
Yeah.
And so at the beginning of COVID, I was taking that very personally. I'm excited to see you. And this is how you responded to me right now.
Gosh.
And that was probably the biggest adjustment. I mean, we had a little bit of that, but when Micah was having to leave the house to go to work, but it's different. It's a little different when the pull is a little bit more on you during this season.
Yeah, I think our love languages too started to either show up different. I don't even fully, I think we need to sit down and process this together a bit more. But it felt like they were shifting either as a result of stress from COVID or just happened to be shifting in March. But for me, it was just enough. And it was the world to me to just sit next to you and just feel your skin and just smell you. That was all I needed. But for you, I could sense this desire to let's connect, let's spend quality time, let's talk, let me in your world and tell me what you're thinking, tell me how your day was. And I was just like, I don't have any of that to give right now. Can I just sit next to you? And I'm not sure if because I was so stretched, if I could verbalize that in March and April. And so we just kept missing each other. Yeah. And yeah, it broke my heart that, that it happened that way. And I'm grateful that now we've been able to process it. And I could say to you, I'm sorry. I just didn't know how to verbalize it. I had nothing left, and that feeling your skin was enough. And I'm grateful for that. But it's man, COVID, dang, you really tried to mess up a sister's marriage real quick. Slow down. But I think one thing we can be grateful for too is that like we in the house together. So if we gonna talk about it or what? Because it's just us in these four walls, nowhere to go.
Yeah, there's nowhere to hide. There's nowhere to hide. There's no private spaces anymore.
No.
And I think on my end, so there's this. Okay, this is a little bit of a roundabout story, but there's a show that I really like. It's called 30 Rock.
Okay, this is a roundabout.
Yes. And there's an episode where Tina Fey's character, Liz Lemon, she should be seeing a therapist, but she's not.
Okay.
And so she goes, it just sits down and it's just laying all her problems down on this one of the little pages that work in the building. And so her boss comes in and says, I thought you were seeing a therapist. She's like, yeah, it's Kenneth. Just listen to all my problems. It's like, you can't just tell him everything. He can't handle it. And so they show him the notebook and he's just fixated on this one thing he says that basically broke his brain. And he's just sitting there writing it down over and over and over again. And so the boss says, okay, you need to go find a therapist and leave this man alone. Therapist. And so she sits him down, sits Kenneth down and is like, hey, tell me your issues and I'll put them in my mind device and crush them. And so I think in my mind, this is not obviously consciously, this is not what I was thinking. I think I always thought I had a mind device and that whatever emotions I was feeling, whatever emotions anybody else was feeling, I could take it and just crush it.
Nope.
And just crush it. And then COVID happened and my mind device could not crush enough of what was happening for me to function. No. And so there would be times when Micah would ask me about how I'm feeling. I'd just be like, I'm fine. She's like, in her mind, she's like, no, you're not fine. and I need you to know that you're not fine. And it's okay that you're not fine, but that's not a part of my, that was not a part of my mental health language or vocabulary, that being not fine is okay. Yeah. And so it caused another stressor on us because Micah knows that something's wrong. I'm acting like nothing is wrong. And so now we're just in this weird, me trying to act like everything's okay, and Micah's like, okay, it's really not okay, but okay, whatever. We'll just keep talking about whatever sports, I guess, today.
Okay, so here's what I'll say. Here's what I think is not fair about how I did that, because in me saying to you, quote, I know something's wrong. Mm-hmm. What I observed in you is that you began second guessing yourself, and you were like, looking at the ground like, okay, am I not okay? What's going on? And I don't think that was fair. And so I think,
in your defense, I was not okay.
True.
I was not okay, and you were right.
But then there was this moment where you were kind of thrown into this introspection that I didn't ask you if you wanted to, think about the machinations of your thoughts right now. You know what I mean? Like, so I think what I've appreciated is that now sometimes you'll just say, I don't know. Like, I don't know how I'm feeling. Yeah. Or I don't want to talk about it. Yeah. And like, those are boundaries for me, to just wait until you've processed it and figured out. Or maybe I'll ask, like, okay, well, do you want to like talk about it? You want to think out loud about it? And sometimes you'd be like, no, I don't know. I'll let you know later. And that's a boundary for me to be like, okay, he's processing it. He's figuring it out. And you've been gracious in, if there is something that I've done to affect you emotionally, you'll let me know. And so I can just trust that, okay, he just needs some time.
I think I had to learn, like, whenever I couldn't trace something, an emotion to something, I think, well, everything's really okay. It's just whatever. I'm fine. And so then it would be like aggravating when I'm like, have to keep confronting it. And I'm like, no, I'm fine. Really, I'm fine. Like, okay, the look in your eyes, Malcolm, doesn't make me think that you're fine, but okay. Your facial expression is saying that. But I think what the sign of growth for me that I noticed was when I was able to say, I don't know why, I just don't. I'm aggravated. I don't know why. Yeah. Like, I'm depressed today. I don't know why.
And that was it was so freeing for me. You know what I mean? Because I know emotions aren't linear. Like, feelings just pop, like, hey, what's up? Like, here's some irritation for you. I didn't ask you to come here, but great, come on in. And so for you to just say, I don't know what's going on. This is just how I feel. I could just stop there, and I could stop wondering. I could stop trying to figure out narratives to fill in why you're feeling the way you do, and just let I don't know be okay.
Yeah.
You know? And so even though COVID has stretched both of us very thin emotionally, it's changed the way that we've communicated with one another about those emotions. And I think it's put us in a position where we respect each other's emotional boundaries in ways that I think invite more intimacy, because I end up feeling more connected to you and more eager. I wouldn't say, like, now I know that if I try to connect with you emotionally, I'm going to get a good result. I'm going to get honesty. I'm going to get vulnerability from you. And so that makes me want to do it more.
Yeah.
And so, you know, if COVID was trying to cook something up, it ain't work. No, because now we now we all connected.
I'm way more in touch with my emotions now. I know everything.
No, the whole world is opened up.
I am a minimally trained therapist now.
Yikes.
I can go out here and fix everybody's problems.
I mean, you do have some solid coaching skills, so I will say that.
So here's, if I were to distill all of this that we just talked about.
Yes, distill.
For me, myself personally, which is one of my least, you guys, that's one of my least favorite phrases. Me, myself personally, because all of those things mean the same thing. None of those things mean any different. If you would just say personally, you don't have to say me, myself, I, whoever. Personally means you. When do we ever speak for somebody else? Like speaking,
many of us do.
No, but in a conversation like this, be like, speaking for this person, their depression was the worst. It's like, wait a minute.
Why are you speaking for him?
Why am I catching stray bullets right now in this situation? But how I would distill what I've learned during COVID it's purely emotional for me. Like it was very, like I had to deal with that.
Yeah.
And so learning that not being okay is okay. Like I'm not broken. I'm not, you know, it is not all bad emotions are the result of something bad. Sometimes you just have a reaction to something and you don't know it yet. You'll figure it out later. And so that's just not something that I was raised to believe. If you had a bad emotion, then you need to fix it. Like, fix your face before you go into this building, before you embarrass me. Well, all right, then
I'm having flashbacks. But yes.
So, Micah giving me the space to say, hey, she's like, I don't put words in her mouth, but I don't care if you're feeling something bad, but just let's talk about it. Yeah. And it's okay to talk about it. Like, she doesn't take it personally. I tend to take it more personally, even when it has nothing to do with me. But that's just because I'm me. I don't know. I mean, I have a wide range of emotions. I wouldn't take very many. I'm very emotionally flexible. But I had to learn that, hey, there's going to be days where you're just going to sit outside and cry. And you're not. It's okay. The world isn't ending. It doesn't even have to be because of anything big. Nope. But in this moment for you right now, this is what you're feeling. And it's okay to feel that. And it's okay to not be able to fix it. Or verbalize it. Yeah. Sometimes you just don't get to talk about it or don't want to talk about it. And that's where I was always, what made it difficult for me to communicate that was because, well, I don't know why. So there's nothing to talk about. Yeah. But sometimes it's just, Micah just wants to hear my process and be able to understand why I'm making the facial expression I'm making. Or why did I just snap at our dog when he just walked into the room? Like, be able to explain that, and be able to recognize that it's happening, even if you don't fully know why it's happening. Oh, goodness. So how would you distill this for you? What you've learned in COVID thus far? Yeah, I think for me, it's been acknowledging that my emotional prowess has been pared down quite a bit. And just accepting that. I mean, as you know, I love making space for people and making a space for people where they feel loved and welcomed and affirmed and accepted. And my capacity to do that is much more limited now. And the way my mind naturally works is, if I'm not able to do something well suddenly, then I'm a bad person. It becomes, it's just the way my mind works because of what I've been through. And
that's my natural way to go. And so when March and April hit and I was noticing that like, oh, like I'm irritable for what seems like no reason. And I don't have as much patience as I'd like. And I'm telling folks that I need, space and to be by myself more often than I'd like. And my mind was immediately telling me that like, oh, that means you're a bad therapist, or that means you're a bad friend, or that means you're a bad wife, and that means you're a bad this. And so COVID is putting me in a position where I need to accept that my limits are going to shift and they're going to change. And that doesn't mean that I'm less loved or less lovable. It just means I'm human.
That's good.
So
that's good. Well, I think if I were to leave our listeners with something, I would say I'm not an expert. Micah is an expert, actually. She's a trained therapist.
I would say expert. I'm trained, not an expert.
Whatever. But you have to find what works for you in whatever situation. We don't have every answer for every situation. But find what's true for you, for what works for your situation, your circumstances.
And let that be enough.
And that's a great way to leave this episode. That's a great way to leave this episode.
I would say, I would agree.
This is a great part one of our COVID conversation. Not sure when the next one will be. But we're assuming that there will be another one.
But y'all, we really do love y'all for coming and listening and sharing this space with us. So as always, feel free to continue this conversation on Twitter. You can find me at Spoken Worship. And
I am at Malcolm M Music. That's MALCOLM Music.
Lots of M's.
And
then, of course, you can use the hashtag #TalkAboutItPod.
Yes. We're so thankful that you guys are joining us, did join us, will continue to join us. And once again, this has been Malcolm Morgan.
And Micah Morgan.
And we'll see you next time on Let's Talk About It.